The thing that made Mabel Hartley sit down in the funeral home was not the envelope of cash or Henry's watch or the wedding ring the undertaker had slipped into a little paper packet. It was a folding dressmaker's ruler. The ruler was made of pale wood, hinged in 3 places, with black numbers worn soft by years of fingers. One end was darkened by an old scorch mark. Mabel knew that burn. She had watched her mother make it in 1924 by setting the ruler too close to the stove while measuring curtain cloth. The ruler had belonged to Beatrice Rowe. After Beatrice died, everyone in the family had agreed that Clara took it. Clara had taken other things too, they said. Most of all, she had taken $210 from the blue baking tin above the pantry shelf, left town before dawn, and never come back. Mabel had not spoken her younger sister's name aloud in 8 years. Yet there it was now, written in Henry's square handwriting on a strip of brown paper wrapped around the ruler. Clara Rowan, Jefferson Avenue Sewing Room, Tuesday. Mabel read it once, then again. The funeral director, Mr. Pritchard, had been talking about Henry's overcoat. He stopped when he saw her face. He asked whether she wanted a glass of water. Mabel said no. Her voice sounded like somebody else's. Outside, February rain rattled against the narrow windows of Pritchard & Sons. St. Joseph had been gray for a week. The streets were slushy at the curbs, and the Missouri River beyond the warehouses looked like a length of dirty metal under the low sky. Henry had been dead 4 days. Pneumonia, the doctor said. It had begun with a cough after 3 wet mornings on a WPA drainage project north of town. Henry had insisted he was fine. He had always believed that saying a thing calmly made it more likely to be true. By the time Mabel made him stay in bed, his fever had climbed so high that the doctor stopped pretending not to worry. Now his watch was in a paper packet. His wedding ring was in another, and in Mabel's lap lay her dead mother's ruler with Clara's name around it. "Was that in his coat?" Mabel asked. Mr. Pritchard nodded. He explained that Henry had come in wearing the brown wool coat with the shiny elbows. The ruler had been in the inside pocket with 2 streetcar transfers, a stub of pencil, 3 peppermint drops, and a 5-cent piece. Mabel knew the coat. She had brushed it before Henry left the house on his last morning. She had not known the pocket. That thought bothered her more than it should have. A marriage was full of pockets, she supposed. 49 years old and 26 years a wife, she knew better than to imagine otherwise. There were pockets in coats and pockets in conversation. There were things a husband forgot to mention because they seemed small, and things a wife did not ask because supper was burning or a boarder had tracked mud across the kitchen floor. But Clara was not small. Clara was the one door in Mabel's life that had been shut so hard the frame had cracked. She folded the ruler and put it into her handbag. On the way home, she walked instead of taking the streetcar. Henry would have told her the sidewalks were too slick. She could hear him saying it in the patient tone he used when he thought she was being stubborn and preferred not to name the offense. The Hartleys lived in a 3-story brick house on South 12th Street, where the front parlor had become a dining room for boarders, and the upstairs bedrooms had acquired numbers written in Mabel's hand on small white cards. It had not always been a boarding house. When she and Henry bought it in 1926, Henry had stood in the front hall and said the place was too large for 2 people. He had said it lightly. Mabel had pretended not to hear the part underneath. They had expected children then. By 1930, they no longer did. By 1932, when Henry lost his position as bookkeeper at a wholesale hardware firm, the extra rooms stopped looking empty and started looking useful. Mabel took in 1 railroad man, then a widowed schoolteacher, then 2 brothers who worked whenever the packing house had hours for them. At the worst point, there had been 7 boarders and only 1 bathroom. Mabel learned to make a chicken serve 11 people, to mend sheets until the patches needed patches, and to say "rent on Friday" with enough warmth that a proud man could hear it without feeling begged from. Henry hated the boarding house for 6 months. Then he began fixing everything in it. He repaired stair treads, tightened bed frames, built a rack for wet coats, and learned which boarder took coffee black and which one pretended not to be hungry near the end of the week. By 1935, he had stopped calling the men "your boarders" and started calling them "the boys," though 2 were older than he was. Mabel let herself into the house just before 4. The smell of onions met her in the hall. Mrs. Bell from the 2nd floor had promised to watch the stew. Somewhere upstairs, somebody coughed. A radio played softly behind a closed door, the announcer's voice fading in and out beneath static. Mabel took off her hat but not her coat. She went straight to the kitchen, put the ruler on the table, and stared at it. The scorch mark looked exactly as it had when she was 17. Their mother had laughed when she burned it. Beatrice Rowe had not laughed much in the final year of her life. That was the year the money disappeared. Mabel had spent 8 years telling herself she remembered those days clearly. Now, with the ruler in front of her, memory did something treacherous. It began supplying details she had not asked for. Clara standing barefoot in the pantry doorway with her hair loose, their mother's blue baking tin open on the table. Edwin Rowan pounding at the back door and demanding to know where his wife had gone. Mabel's own voice saying, "If she took Mama's money, I don't want to hear another excuse." Henry's hand on her elbow. Beatrice in bed upstairs, weak after the stroke, unable to make a whole sentence come out cleanly. And the ruler. Mabel remembered asking where it was 2 weeks after Clara vanished. Beatrice had looked toward the sewing basket and then toward the window. Mabel had decided that look meant Clara had stolen it too. It had been easy to decide things in 1929. Not because life was easy. Because Mabel had still believed that respectable families stayed respectable by naming wrongdoing quickly and refusing to be dragged into it. Her father had been dead 6 years. Henry had a steady job. The house payment arrived every month and went out every month. Mabel wore gloves to church. Clara's marriage had always been a source of worry, and Clara herself had become nervous, secretive, forever turning up with explanations that sounded incomplete. When $210 disappeared from Beatrice's pantry and Clara disappeared the same night, the conclusion had seemed almost merciful in its simplicity. Clara had stolen it. Clara had left Edwin. Clara had shamed them. Then the market fell that autumn, and before long half the country seemed to be losing things more important than reputation. But by then Mabel had already fixed Clara in her mind as the one person who had chosen disgrace rather than been overtaken by hardship. The kitchen door opened. Mrs. Bell came in carrying a wooden spoon. She was 61, small and permanently unimpressed. She had taught arithmetic in a rural school until the district stopped paying teachers regularly and her married daughter persuaded her to come to town. She had rented Mabel's back bedroom for 3 years and considered privacy a useful idea in theory. She saw the ruler. "What's that?" she asked. "Nothing." "That's a poor answer when you're staring at it like it owes you money." Mabel put the ruler into her handbag. Mrs. Bell watched her do it but did not press. Instead, she said the stew needed salt and Mr. Ferris had left a note that he would be late because the packing house added a shift. A year earlier, an added shift would not have been news. In 1937, everything was news if it meant a man might bring home $3 more. Mabel thanked her. Mrs. Bell's expression softened. "The flowers from the church came," she said. "They're in the parlor. Too many lilies, if you ask me. Smell like somebody already closed the lid." Mabel almost laughed. It hurt so suddenly that she had to grip the back of a chair. Mrs. Bell looked away, which was one of the kindest things anyone had done all week. After supper, after the boarders went upstairs, after Mabel washed 9 plates and put Henry's plate away untouched, she sat at the kitchen table again. She opened her handbag. The ruler was there. So were Henry's effects from the funeral home. She emptied them onto the oilcloth one by one. Streetcar transfers, peppermints, the nickel, a pencil, his wallet, a folded grocery list in her own handwriting. Nothing else. Mabel opened the wallet. There were $3, Henry's Social Security account card from the year before, and a photograph of Mabel at a church picnic in 1927, caught mid-laugh with one hand raised against the sun. Behind the photograph was a small, cream-colored card. Jefferson Avenue Sewing Room, Tuesday, February 16th, 2 p.m. Ask for Mrs. Rowan. Mabel looked at the calendar on the wall. February 16th had been Henry's last Tuesday out of bed. He had told her he was going to see the WPA foreman about 2 days of missing pay. He had come home after 3, wet through at the shoulders, carrying a loaf of day-old bread and a paper sack of apples. She had scolded him for not wearing his overshoes. He had kissed the top of her head and said the streets were only rain, not the Atlantic Ocean. That night he coughed until 2 in the morning. Mabel put the cream card beside the ruler. The house settled around her with small noises, pipes ticking, a floorboard upstairs, wind moving against the back window. For the first time since Henry died, grief moved aside just enough to let another feeling through. It was not jealousy. Clara was her sister. It was not anger either, not yet. It was the humiliating certainty that Henry had known something about Mabel's own family that he had chosen not to tell her. And on the last Tuesday of his life, sick enough to die from what he caught in that week's cold rain, he had been trying to see Clara Rowan. Mabel did not sleep much that night. By morning she had decided that whatever Henry had kept from her, she would learn it before he was buried. The Jefferson Avenue sewing room occupied the second floor of an old furniture store 6 blocks north of the courthouse. Mabel had passed the building many times without noticing it. A painted sign hung over the street entrance, modest enough to be missed between a shoe repair shop and a drugstore window crowded with patent medicines. Upstairs, women worked at long tables beneath high windows clouded by winter grime. The room was louder than Mabel expected. Treadle machines clicked and rattled. Scissors struck tabletops. Women called for thread, pins, another bundle of cloth. Some were making hospital gowns. Others repaired donated coats or cut children's garments from bolts of inexpensive cotton. A supervisor with iron-gray hair moved between stations with a clipboard under one arm. Mabel had heard people at church speak of the sewing project in 2 different tones. One tone made it sound like rescue. The other made it sound like a confession. Women who had once altered sleeves for neighbors or kept their own families in clean shirts now signed forms, stood in offices, proved need, and worked beneath government supervision for wages that kept rent paid but did not erase embarrassment. Mabel understood that kind of pride. She had seen it in men who came to her back door asking whether she needed coal carried while carefully avoiding the word work. She gave the gray-haired supervisor the cream card from Henry's wallet. "I'm looking for Mrs. Rowan." The woman read the card, then looked at Mabel. "Who are you?" "Mrs. Henry Hartley." The supervisor's face changed. Not much, just enough. "You're Mabel." Mabel disliked hearing her first name from a stranger. "Yes." The woman set down the clipboard. "My name is Lillian Sykes. I knew Henry." "How?" "He came here sometimes." "For Clara?" Lillian glanced toward the sewing tables. Mabel followed her eyes. No woman there looked like Clara. She hated herself for expecting to recognize her sister after 8 years. Clara had been 39 when she disappeared. She would be 47 now. 8 years could sharpen a face, soften it, bend shoulders, whiten hair. The Depression had made old people of men under 40 and had also, strangely, left some older women looking almost unchanged except around the mouth. "Is she here?" Mabel asked. Lillian said no. "Where is she?" "I don't know that I should tell you." Mabel felt heat rise under her collar. "I am her sister." "I know." "That should answer your question." Lillian's expression did not move. "Maybe it answers one question." Mabel had known women like her all her life. Women who could refuse a request without lifting their voice, then stand there until the other person discovered that volume was useless. Mabel tried another way. "My husband died Sunday." This time the change in Lillian's face was unmistakable. She closed her eyes for a second. "I'm sorry." "He had an appointment here Tuesday. He was already sick. I found Clara's name in his coat. I want to know why." Around them, machines kept clicking. Lillian pulled a chair away from the wall. "Sit down." "I'd rather stand." "Then stand, but I'm going to sit." She sat. Mabel remained standing for perhaps 10 seconds before deciding that principle was not worth making herself look foolish. Lillian told her Henry had first come to the sewing room in the autumn of 1935, not long after the project opened. He asked for Clara Rowan by name. Clara had been working there 3 days a week when materials and assignments were available. She was not there that afternoon. Henry returned 2 days later. He kept returning. Not every week, sometimes months passed. He brought no gifts that Lillian saw, except once a jar of preserves and another time a pair of wool gloves that he claimed belonged to Clara already. "What did they talk about?" Mabel asked. "That wasn't my business." "It seems everyone had a great respect for business except my husband, who made mine his." Lillian let that pass. "Clara stopped working here last fall. Her hands got bad." "What do you mean?" "Stiffness, swelling. Some days she could barely close her fingers. Sewing all day didn't help." Mabel thought of Clara at 19, sitting cross-legged on their mother's floor, turning a hem so quickly that Beatrice told her to slow down before she stitched her own skirt to the tablecloth. She pushed the image away. Where did she go? Lillian hesitated. Then she said Clara was living in 2 rooms behind a bakery on South 7th, across from a warehouse yard. Her daughter Anna lived with her. Mabel stared. Anna? Lillian's eyes narrowed. You know Anna exists? Of course I know she exists. The answer came out too sharp. Anna had been 17 when Clara left, a thin girl with dark braids and a habit of reading while she walked, which Mabel had once called an excellent way to fall into a horse trough. Anna had been old enough to know exactly what happened in that house. Old enough to hear Mabel accuse her mother. Old enough to go with Clara. Mabel had imagined Anna dozens of times during the first year. After that, less often. By the time the depression tightened around St. Joseph, Mabel stopped wondering whether they had gone to Omaha, Kansas City, Denver, or somewhere farther west. The world had become too crowded with people who had vanished from one address and appeared at another. Why is she here? Mabel asked. She works at the telephone exchange when they give her hours. Sometimes she types for a lawyer on Felix Street. And Clara has lived in St. Joseph all this time? No. How long? Since 1934. 3 years. Mabel gripped the edge of the chair. Henry had known her sister lived less than 2 miles away for 3 years. She thought of every Sunday breakfast. Every evening, Henry sat at the end of the kitchen table reading the paper. Every time he told her he was going to the hardware store, the project office, the barber, the depot, the library. 3 years was not an omission. It was architecture. It was a whole hidden room built inside their marriage. Did he give her money? Mabel asked. Lillian's mouth tightened. I don't keep accounts for other people. Did he? Sometimes he paid for coal. Once, medicine. Not enough to make anybody rich, if that's what you're asking. I am not asking whether my sister got rich from my husband. No, you're asking whether he betrayed you. Mabel stood. I did not say that. You didn't have to. Lillian rose too. Henry talked about you often. Mabel hated that sentence even more. What did he say? That you make biscuits too hard when you're angry. For one absurd second, Mabel nearly smiled. Then Lillian added, he said you were the strongest person he knew, and sometimes that strength made it difficult for people to tell you they were hurt. Mabel's smile died before it formed. That sounds very much like a dead man's wisdom. He said it while he was alive. Mabel put on her gloves. Lillian touched the cream card on the table. He was supposed to meet Clara Tuesday because she had agreed to something. What? To see you. Mabel stopped. Lillian continued more gently. Henry had been asking her for years. She always said no. Last week she finally said she would come to the house after his project day. Tuesday at 2 was when they were going to settle how. Mabel heard the machines behind her, each treadle rising and falling like 100 impatient clocks. Why now? I don't know. You knew enough to call me strong. I knew what Henry told me. I don't know what changed Clara's mind. Mabel took the ruler from her handbag and unfolded it on the table. Lillian looked at it. That's hers. No, it was my mother's. I mean, Clara carried it. She used it here until her hands got bad. Then why did Henry have it? Lillian touched the scorch mark with one finger. Because Clara asked him to bring it to you. Mabel felt as though the noisy room had gone silent. Why? She said you would understand. I don't. Lillian looked at her for a long moment. Then maybe you need to ask Clara. Mabel left without doing so. She walked 3 blocks in the rain before realizing she was headed south toward South 7th. Then she turned west instead. Henry's funeral was at 2. The church basement filled before the service with casseroles, coffee, women carrying cake under towels, men in dark coats shaking Mabel's hand with solemn discomfort. People who had not visited in months appeared to say Henry had been a good man. Mabel thanked every one of them. At the front of the sanctuary, Henry lay in a walnut-colored coffin Mabel had chosen because the cheaper one looked too thin and the expensive one would have made him angry. She stood beside it until her feet hurt. Mrs. Bell stayed near enough to intercept anyone who spoke too long. Mr. Ferris from the 2nd floor had shaved carefully. The packing house brothers came in their work shoes and stood in the back. Henry's WPA foreman removed his hat and told Mabel that Henry never marked a man absent if a truck breakdown kept the crew from reaching the ditch. The church treasurer said Henry had once fixed 3 folding chairs without being asked. A dozen tiny pieces of him came back through other people's mouths. Mabel kept waiting for one piece to be Clara. No one said the name. During the hymn, she looked toward the rear doors. She told herself she was watching for late arrivals. Clara did not come. Neither did Anna. After the burial, the rain became sleet. Mabel returned to the house with 23 people and enough food to feed twice that number. She sliced ham, poured coffee, accepted plates she did not want, and listened to people remember Henry. Near 5, her cousin Edith cornered her by the sink. Edith had always been able to turn concern into an interrogation. "What will you do with this place now?" she asked. "Continue living in it? I mean all these boarders." "So do I." Edith lowered her voice. "You don't need strange men upstairs now that Henry's gone." Mabel looked through the doorway at Mr. Ferris, who was carrying a tray of cups into the dining room, and at old Mr. Talbot, who had arthritis so badly he needed both hands to button his coat. "I have survived the danger so far." "Mabel, be sensible. People talk." "People talked when I took boarders because Henry had no job. They talked when I charged them because charity would have been more ladylike. Now they'll talk because my husband is dead. It seems cruel to deprive them of employment." Edith pursed her lips. "You don't have to be sharp." Mabel almost said that sharpness was useful when everyone wanted to cut pieces off your life for your own good. Instead, she wiped the sink. After Edith left, Mrs. Bell came in with a stack of saucers. "She deserved worse," she said. "You were listening." "I have ears. They were issued at birth." Mabel dried a cup. Then she said, "Henry knew where Clara was." Mrs. Bell stopped moving. Mabel had not intended to tell anyone. The words arrived because grief had made holding things harder than usual. "My sister," she added, "the one who left." "I remember. He knew for years." Mrs. Bell set down the saucers. Mabel told her about the ruler, the sewing room, Tuesday's appointment, Clara living on South 7th. Mrs. Bell listened without interruption. When Mabel finished, she expected outrage on her behalf. Instead, Mrs. Bell asked, "Are you going to see her?" "Did you hear the part where my husband lied to me for 3 years?" "I heard it." "Then why are you asking about Clara?" "Because Henry is dead and cannot answer. Clara is alive and can." Mabel stared at her. Mrs. Bell picked up the saucers again. "You can be angry at a grave for the rest of your life," she said. "It won't get tired before you do." That's a cheerful thing to say on the day of a funeral. I taught fractions to farm boys for 32 years. Cheerfulness is not my specialty. She carried the saucers away. That night, Mabel slept in the middle of the bed for the first time. She woke before dawn with one hand stretched toward Henry's side. The sheet was cold. For a while, she lay still and remembered the last real argument they had, in November. Henry had come home late from somewhere, and Mabel had accused him of volunteering at the church repair committee again when they had a leaking drain pipe of their own. He had said he was taking care of something. She asked what. He said, "Something I should have taken care of a long time ago." She assumed he meant the drain pipe. At breakfast, she found the folding ruler exactly where she had left it on the kitchen table. She opened it to its full length. Near the 20-inch mark, beneath years of scratches, someone had cut 3 tiny letters into the wood with the point of a needle. B.R. Beatrice Rowe. Mabel remembered her mother doing that too. Then she saw something she did not remember. On the inside of the last fold, faint in pencil, were 2 dates. April 3rd, 1929. April 5th, 1929. Beside the second date was a number, 210. 210, the exact amount Clara had supposedly stolen. Mabel folded the ruler so quickly that one hinge snapped against her finger. For the first time in 8 years, she allowed herself to ask a question she had treated as settled. What if the money had not been stolen at all? Mabel did not go to South 7th that morning. Instead, she went to the house where she and Clara had grown up. It stood on Lafayette Street, behind a line of bare elms, narrower than Mabel remembered, and painted a yellow that Beatrice would have disliked. A young couple rented it now. The woman answered the door with a baby on one hip and flour on her cheek. Mabel explained that her mother had once lived there and asked whether anything old remained in the cellar. The young woman looked doubtful until Mabel said she was not claiming the furnace, the shelves, or the property. Then she laughed and let her in. The cellar smelled of coal dust and damp stone. Henry had helped Beatrice build storage shelves along one wall in 1925. Those shelves were gone. So was the old fruit cupboard. The nail where her father once hung his work apron remained, rusted into a beam. Mabel found nothing. She had not expected to. Still, standing beneath the kitchen where the blue tin had once sat above the pantry shelf, she began to remember the week Clara left with a clarity that made her stomach hurt. April 1929. Months before the crash. People later talked about that year as if October had reached backward and stained everything that came before it. But in April, Henry still had his bookkeeping position. Stores advertised spring suits. Edwin Rowan worked steadily at a machine shop. Mabel and Henry were making payments on their house and trying not to speak of the doctor who had told them there would probably be no baby. Clara had been married to Edwin for 18 years. Mabel had never liked him. That fact had become inconvenient after Clara left, so Mabel had stored it somewhere separate from the rest of the story. Edwin was not a drunk, which people used as evidence that he was respectable. He worked. He wore a clean collar on Sundays. He shook hands firmly. He never shouted where neighbors could hear. But Clara had begun arriving at Beatrice's house with small bruises she explained badly. A cupboard door. A fall against the washtub. Once a mark high on her arm that looked like 4 fingers. Mabel had asked directly that time. Clara said Edwin had grabbed her during an argument. Mabel remembered her own reply and wished she did not. She had told Clara not to provoke him when he was tired. Not because Mabel thought men had a right to hurt their wives. She would have denied that angrily. But there were things respectable women were expected to manage quietly. A husband's temper. A short paycheck. A mother-in-law. A difficult child. A disappointment no one could fix. Mabel had believed endurance and goodness were close relatives. 3 days before Clara disappeared, Edwin came to Beatrice's house looking for her. Clara had not arrived yet. He stood in the kitchen and told Beatrice that his wife was getting ideas. He said she had spoken to a lawyer. He said married women who listened to foolish advice ruined their own homes. Mabel had been there. She remembered Beatrice telling Edwin to leave. She remembered how strange her mother's voice sounded. Quiet, flat, without the usual politeness. Edwin left. 2 days later, Beatrice went to town alone in the morning. On April 5th, she spent nearly an hour upstairs with Clara. That night, Clara and Anna vanished. The blue tin was empty. By noon, Edwin was at the house accusing Clara of theft. By evening, Mabel believed him. Beatrice had her stroke the following morning. She lived another 7 months, but her speech never fully returned. Some days she could name objects. Other days, she could not say Mabel's name. She grew angry when they tried to make her repeat words. Once in June, she pointed toward the sewing basket and said, "Clara, mine, gave." Mabel had thought she meant Clara had taken what was hers. Now, in the cellar of the old house, Mabel heard the sentence differently. Clara, mine, gave. Maybe Beatrice had not been accusing anyone. Maybe she had been trying to say that she gave something to Clara. Mabel walked home in a wind that pushed newspaper scraps along the gutters. She found Mrs. Bell in the dining room correcting a boy's arithmetic on the back of a grocery circular. The boy was the landlord's son from next door, who came twice a week because his school class was crowded, and his mother said he needed somebody mean about multiplication. Mabel waited until he left. Then she put the ruler on the table and told Mrs. Bell what she remembered. Mrs. Bell unfolded it. April 3rd, she read. April 5th. 2:10. My mother did sums on anything, receipts, newspaper margins, seed packets. She would calculate yardage on this ruler. You think she wrote the amount there? I think I wanted to mean she did. That's different. Yes. Mrs. Bell refolded the ruler. Good, at least you know the difference. Mabel wanted to be irritated. Instead, she sat down. Edwin said Clara stole the money. Was he there when it disappeared? No. Did your mother say Clara stole it? No. Did anyone see Clara take it? No. Mrs. Bell lifted one eyebrow. Mabel said, "You would have been an unbearable lawyer." I was an unbearable teacher. Life has its own economy. Mabel looked toward the stairs. What if I was wrong? Mrs. Bell did not answer quickly. That was worse than reassurance. Finally, she said, "Then you have been wrong for 8 years. Tomorrow you will still be the same age you are today. The question is whether you want to be wrong for 9. At 1 o'clock, Mabel put on her brown hat and walked to South 7th. The bakery Lillian Sykes had described was called Novak's. Warm yeast and coal smoke drifted into the alley behind it. 2 rooms occupied the rear of the building, reached by a narrow wooden stair. Mabel stood at the bottom long enough for a delivery boy to squeeze past her with an empty flour sack over his shoulder. Then she climbed. Anna answered the door. Mabel knew her immediately. The braids were gone. Her hair was cut to her jaw and tucked behind her ears. She was 25 now, not 17, but the dark eyes were unchanged. For a second, neither woman spoke. Then Anna said, "Aunt Mabel." No surprise, no question, just her name. Mabel's prepared sentences scattered. "Is your mother here?" Anna looked past her toward the stairs. "No." "Will she be back?" "Yes." "When?" "Later." Mabel waited for an invitation. None came. She noticed Anna wore a navy skirt polished shiny at the hips and a white blouse with a careful repair at one cuff. Behind her, the rooms were clean and spare. A coal stove, a narrow table, a bed behind a curtain, a second cot against the wall. On the table sat a typewriter with 2 keys missing their letters. "Henry died," Mabel said. Anna's face changed at once. She put one hand against the doorframe. "When?" "Sunday." Anna closed her eyes. Mabel had expected many reactions from Clara and Anna if she ever saw them again. Defiance, shame, coldness. She had not expected grief. "You cared for him," Mabel said. Anna opened her eyes. "He was good to us." The words felt like a judgment, even though Anna did not say them that way. "How long?" "Since he found us." "When did he find you?" 1932. Mabel stared. "Not 1935, not 3 years, 5. "Where?" "Kansas City." Mabel's hand tightened around her handbag. "Your mother didn't move back here until 1934. "No." "Henry knew where you were before that." "Yes." Anna stepped back at last. "You might as well come in." Mabel entered. The room was warmer than the hall. On the stove, a pot of beans simmered beneath a lid. A pair of women's shoes had been placed near the heat, stuffed with newspaper to dry. The place did not look destitute. It looked measured. Every object had a use. Every inch had been asked to do 2 jobs. Anna offered coffee. Mabel said no. Then, because refusing felt childish, she said yes. The coffee was weak but hot. Anna sat across from her. "Henry came to Kansas City in the spring of 1932, she said. "He said he had been looking for us for almost a year. "Why?" "Because Grandma Beatrice left something for Mama." "What?" "Not money." Mabel almost laughed at the speed of the answer. Anna saw it. "You still think it was money?" "I don't know what I think. Mama didn't steal it." Mabel looked at the steam rising from her cup. "Did Henry tell you that?" "My grandmother told me." "Your grandmother could barely speak after the stroke." "She told me before." Mabel looked up. Anna's voice remained steady. "The night we left, Grandma gave Mama the $210. I was in the room. I saw her count it. She told Mama to take me and go before Edwin came home from his night shift." Mabel could hear the stove tick. "You were 17. "I was not a child." "No." "Grandma said she had saved the money from sewing. She said a daughter did not need permission to keep breathing." Mabel's eyes burned. That sounded like Beatrice, not the words exactly, the shape of them. Beatrice, who had once told a grocer that bruised apples were still apples, but bruised daughters ought not be sold cheap. "Why didn't Clara tell me?" Mabel asked. Anna's expression hardened for the first time. "She did." Mabel shook her head. "She did not. She wrote you from Omaha 2 weeks later." "I never received a letter." "She wrote again from Kansas City in June." "I never received it." "She wrote at Christmas." "Anna, I did not receive a letter." Anna stood, crossed to the small dresser, and opened the bottom drawer. She returned with 3 envelopes tied together by string. Mabel recognized her own address on each one. All 3 had been returned. The first said, "Moved, no forwarding address," in purple ink. The second bore a penciled note, "Address unknown." The third had been opened and resealed. On the back, in handwriting Mabel knew, were 4 words. "Do not write again." Edwin Rowan's handwriting. Mabel stared at it. How did he get this? Anna said, Mama sent it to Grandma's house because your street had changed numbering after some road work. Edwin was watching the place. He took it from the box. We learned later. That doesn't explain the first two. You and Henry moved to South 12th in 1926. We did? Mama had the old address. Of course. Clara had visited the new house only twice. She had always written to Beatrice instead. Mabel touched the first envelope. Why didn't she try after Christmas? Anna laughed once, without humor. She did, not with letters. What does that mean? In 1930, she came back to St. Joseph. Mabel's hand froze. Anna leaned back. She came to your house. No. Yes. I would remember my sister at my door. You weren't home. Mabel heard something inside herself begin to shift. Henry was. Anna nodded. He told Mama you were at the hospital visiting your friend Margaret. He gave her coffee. She told him everything. Then she left before you came back. Why? Because he asked her to. Mabel stood so abruptly the chair scraped the floor. Henry sent her away? Yes. Why? Anna looked toward the door as if wishing Clara would walk through it. Then she said, because that was the month you lost the baby. Mabel stopped breathing. There were griefs so old a person believed they had become part of the foundation. Then one word struck the floor above them, and dust fell from the ceiling. January 1930. Mabel had been 41, too old to expect the pregnancy and too frightened to enjoy it. She and Henry had told almost no one. At nearly 5 months, there was bleeding, then pain, then a hospital room, then a doctor who would not meet her eyes for long. Afterward, she had spent 6 weeks moving through the house as though every room belonged to someone else. Clara had come during those 6 weeks, Clara with 17-year-old Anna beside her, a daughter nearly grown. Henry had sat across from Clara in Mabel's kitchen and decided Mabel could not bear to see them. He never told me, she said. No. Not then, not later. No. Did your mother agree? Anna looked down. Not exactly. What does that mean? It means she was angry. She said you deserved the truth. Henry said you deserved time. How much time? Mabel asked. 7 years? Anna had no answer. The door opened behind them. Cold air entered first. Then Clara Rowan stepped into the room carrying a paper sack of potatoes against her chest. She had gone gray at the temples. Her face was thinner, and one shoulder sat slightly higher than the other, but she was still Clara. Mabel knew that before Clara raised her eyes. The paper sack slipped in her arms. A potato rolled across the floor and struck the leg of Mabel's chair. For 8 years, Mabel had imagined what she might say if this moment ever came. None of those sentences survived. Clara looked at her sister, then at the folding ruler protruding from Mabel's handbag. You found it, she said. Mabel swallowed. Henry did. Clara set the potatoes on the table. No, she said quietly. Henry only carried it. You found it. For a while, the 3 women did nothing about the potato on the floor. Anna finally bent, picked it up, and put it back in the sack. Clara removed her coat. Her hands were slower than Mabel remembered. The knuckles were enlarged, the fingers slightly crooked. She saw Mabel looking and tucked both hands under her arms. Lillian told you where we live? She asked. Yes. She promised she wouldn't. Henry died. Clara closed her eyes. Anna told me. Mabel expected her sister to cry. Clara did not. She sat at the table and pressed her lips together until the color left them. I was supposed to see him Tuesday, she said. I know. He said he had something to tell me. What? He wouldn't say. Mabel almost snapped that this was typical of Henry, but grief rose too quickly. She sat again. Why did you give him the ruler? Clara looked toward the handbag. Because Mama marked the dates on it. So it is about the money. It is about more than the money. What happened on April 3rd? Mama went to the bank. And April 5th? She gave me what she took out. Mabel waited. Clara told the story without drama. On April 2nd, 1929, Edwin had shoved her against the kitchen stove during an argument about Anna. He wanted Anna to leave school and work full-time at a laundry owned by his cousin. Clara wanted her to finish. Edwin said books had filled the girl's head with ideas. When Clara told him Anna would stay in school, he struck Clara hard enough to split the inside of her lip. The next morning, Clara went to Beatrice. She did not ask for money. She asked whether she and Anna could stay for a week. Beatrice said yes. Then she went downtown. She withdrew $210 from an account Mabel had not known existed. The money came from years of dress alterations, hems, morning clothes, curtain panels, and wedding dresses sewn after supper. Beatrice had kept it apart from household money because Mabel's father, while never cruel, had believed a wife's earnings belonged in the family purse. After he died, Beatrice kept saving out of habit. She said it was enough for train fare, a room, and time to find work, Clara said. Not enough to start over comfortably, enough to start. Why hide it in the baking tin? She didn't, I did, just for that afternoon. Edwin came by unexpectedly, and I was afraid he would search my handbag. Mabel remembered the blue tin on the pantry shelf. The next night you took it. Yes. And left. Yes. With Anna. Yes. Without telling me. Clara's mouth tightened. I tried to tell you 2 days before. Mabel searched her memory. There had been a Sunday dinner. Clara barely ate. Edwin complained about potatoes. Anna spilled milk. Afterward, Clara followed Mabel into the pantry. She had said, "If a woman couldn't live with her husband anymore, would you think she had failed?" Mabel remembered answering, "That depends what she means by couldn't." Clara had gone quiet. Mabel felt shame move across her skin like fever. "I didn't know what you were asking." "I know. You could have asked plainly." "I was scared." "So was I." "That was the trouble with all of us." Mabel looked at her. Clara's face did not carry victory. That made it harder. "What happened after you left?" Mabel asked. "We went to Omaha first. Edwin had a cousin in Kansas City, so I didn't want to go there. I found work pressing clothes in a laundry. Anna finished her last year of school. Rent took nearly everything. Then the laundry cut hours, then closed. We moved to Kansas City because Anna found typing work there. By 1931, she lost that too." Anna gave a small shrug. "Half the offices in town had a girl who could type and no money to pay her." Clara continued. "They rented one furnished room. Clara took washing when she could. Anna stood in employment lines, worked 2 weeks here, 3 days there, and once spent a month serving coffee in a cafeteria until the owner replaced 2 waitresses with relatives. They did not starve." Clara said this with emphasis, as though expecting Mabel to turn hardship into tragedy for her own satisfaction. They had bad months. Everybody had bad months. In 1932, Henry found them because Beatrice's former bank clerk, a woman named Ruth Gibbons, came into the hardware office where Henry was doing temporary bookkeeping. Mrs. Gibbons recognized him. She asked after Mabel and then asked whether Clara was well. Henry said he had no idea. Mrs. Gibbons looked startled. "She knew about the withdrawal?" Mabel asked. "She handled it." "Why didn't she tell anyone?" "Mama asked her not to. Edwin had friends. She was afraid he would find us before we were settled." "After Mama died?" By then, Mrs. Gibbons had moved to Kansas City. Henry met her by accident years later. It was not the kind of revelation Mabel would have believed if it depended on one letter conveniently preserved in a drawer. But Clara gave names, places, ordinary details. The bank branch near 6th Street. Mrs. Gibbons's habit of tapping a pencil against her teeth. The exact date. Anna remembered the train leaving after midnight. Lillian had seen the ruler in Clara's hands. Henry had carried it on the day he meant to bring Clara back into Mabel's life. The truth did not arrive like lightning. It assembled itself piece by piece until disbelief required more effort than acceptance. "Why did Henry keep seeing you?" Mabel asked. Clara looked at Anna. "Because he thought he owed us." "For what?" "For sending me away in 1930. Mabel felt anger return, almost gratefully. "He had no right to do that." "No." "You agreed." "I agreed to leave your house that day. I did not agree to disappear forever." "Then why did you?" "Because I was angry at him. Because I was ashamed. Because after Mama died, I thought you believed the worst of me and maybe always had. Because Anna needed stability more than I needed to win an argument with my sister." Clara rubbed her right hand with the left. "And because when Henry wrote in 1932, he told me about you." Mabel went still. "What about me?" "That you had started taking boarders, that his job was gone, that you were working from before sunrise until night, that you had stopped sleeping well. He said he had not told you he found us because he was afraid of adding one more burden." Mabel laughed once. "He made me sound like a mule with a fever." "He made you sound like someone he loved." That hurt worse. Mabel turned toward the window. Outside, a truck backed into the warehouse yard. A man shouted directions. Flour dust drifted from the bakery vent and vanished in the cold air. "He paid for your coal," she said, "twice." "Medicine. Once." "What else?" "Nothing for a long time." Anna spoke before Clara could continue. "He brought me books." Mabel looked at her. "Used ones," Anna said, "from the library sale, and old typing paper from offices. He found me a temporary job with a lawyer one winter. Mama hated that he helped." "I did not hate it. You complained every time." "I complained because I could not repay him." "He said you repaid him by letting him stop feeling like a coward." Clara's face tightened. "He shouldn't have said that to you. He said worse things about himself." Mabel almost smiled again, then did not. "Did he ever tell you he planned to tell me?" "Every year." "And every year he didn't?" "Yes." "Why did you agree now?" Clara looked at her hands. "Because Anna is getting married." Mabel blinked. Anna's chin lifted slightly. "To whom?" "A man named Joseph Martin," Anna said. "He works at the post office when they have enough substitute hours and evenings at his uncle's grocery." "When?" "June." Mabel waited for the stab of exclusion. It came. She deserved it, which did not make it gentler. Clara said, "Anna wants family at the wedding. What family we have." Mabel looked from mother to daughter. "You were going to invite me?" "I was going to let Henry bring you to see us first." "That is not the same thing." "No." "Were you going to tell me the truth?" "Yes." "All of it?" "As much as you could hear." Mabel stood. There it was again. People deciding how much truth she could bear. Henry, Clara, perhaps even Beatrice. She picked up her handbag. "I am tired of being treated like a china plate everyone admires while hiding the hammer." Clara's expression sharpened. "That is rich coming from you." Mabel stopped. "You spent half your life telling people what they could bear," Clara said. "You told Mama she was too weak to know about bills. You told me I could bear Edwin if I behaved better. You told Anna she was too young to understand why her mother was frightened. Henry learned that habit somewhere close to home." Anna whispered, "Mama." "No," Clara said. "She came for the truth." Mabel's face burned. She wanted to defend herself point by point. She had helped Beatrice because Beatrice was ill. She had given Clara advice because marriages were complicated. She had tried to protect Anna from adult trouble. Every sentence was true. None of them was enough. "You think I caused all of this?" Mabel said. "I think all of us caused parts of it." "Including you?" "Yes." The immediate answer robbed Mabel of her next weapon. Clara sat back. "I should have come again. I should have found you after Henry wrote. I should not have let anger become a habit just because it was easier than being afraid you would reject me twice." Mabel's eyes filled. Clara looked away to give her privacy. That small courtesy nearly undid her. "I buried my husband yesterday," Mabel said. "I know. And today I learn he kept my sister from me for 5 years." "Yes." "I don't know which of you I'm angriest with. You don't have to choose today." Mabel opened the door. Cold air touched her face. Behind her, Clara said, "Take the ruler." Mabel turned. "It's yours." "It was Mama's." "She gave it to you." "No, she gave it to me when I left. Henry asked me last week whether there was anything I could put in your hands that would make you remember before you judged." Mabel stared at her. Clara's voice softened. "I told him the ruler." "Why?" "Because Mama taught both of us to measure twice before cutting once." A tear slid down Mabel's face before she could stop it. Clara did not move toward her. Neither did Anna. Mabel left. For the next week, she did nothing useful with what she had learned. She cooked breakfast. She collected rent. She wrote Henry's death date in the family Bible and immediately regretted how permanent the ink looked. She washed his shirts, though there was no reason to wash them. She folded them and put them in the bottom drawer. She went to church and endured people asking how she was holding up. She said fine until the word lost meaning. Clara did not come. Anna did not come. Mabel did not go back. On Thursday, a letter arrived from the WPA office addressed to Henry. It contained his final pay voucher and a note from his foreman. Mabel read the note twice because one sentence puzzled her. Mr. Hartley asked that his last Tuesday afternoon be marked unpaid personal time. He said he had a family matter that could not be put off again. Could not be put off again. Mabel sat at the kitchen table with the folding ruler beside the paper. Mrs. Bell came in carrying a basket of laundry. "You're doing it again," she said. "What?" "Staring at that ruler like it's going to confess." Mabel handed her the note. Mrs. Bell read it. "He meant to bring her home," Mabel said. "Looks that way. He waited until the week he died. He didn't know he was going to die. That makes it worse somehow." Mrs. Bell sat down. Mabel said, "I keep thinking if he had lived another week, all of this would have happened with him here." "Maybe. He could have explained himself." "Maybe. You enjoy that word too much. It has saved me from saying foolish things with confidence." Mabel traced one hinge of the ruler. "Clara said Henry learned from me to decide what other people could bear." Mrs. Bell did not look surprised. "You agree?" "I did not say that." "You made a face." "My face is independent." Mabel sighed. "What am I supposed to do with a sister who was right?" "Probably the same thing you would do with one who was wrong. Decide whether you want her in your life." "It's not that simple." "No, simple things are usually not worth 8 years." Mabel stood and went to the stove. The boarding house had taught her that grief did not excuse supper. Potatoes needed peeling. Beans needed soaking. Rent books needed adding. Men who had been laid off did not become less hungry because the landlady was having a revelation. That evening, one of the packing house brothers came downstairs with bad news. His shift had been cut again. He could pay half his rent Friday and the rest when hours returned. Mabel saw the shame in his face before he finished speaking. For years, she had believed kindness meant saying yes quickly enough that a person did not have to beg. So she said, "Half Friday is fine." Then she stopped. The young man was already turning away. "Tom," he looked back, "when do you think you can pay the rest?" He swallowed. "I don't know, Mrs. Hartley." "Then tell me that. Don't invent a date to make me comfortable." He looked startled. "I can't promise." "All right." Mabel wrote half the amount in the rent book. "Now we both know the truth." Tom gave a small, relieved laugh. It was nothing. A rent entry. A sentence. But afterward, Mabel stood alone in the dining room and thought how many years people had spent making promises to protect her from discomfort. Henry had promised everything was fine until fever took him to bed. Clara had promised herself silence was better than rejection. Mabel had promised her own memory that the story of 1929 was settled. The folding ruler lay upstairs on her dresser. Measure twice before cutting once. Mabel had cut first. 8 years later, she was finally measuring what remained. 3 days later, Mabel opened Henry's desk. She had avoided it because the desk still looked occupied. His fountain pen lay uncapped in the tray. A little pile of screws sat in a saucer because Henry believed every loose screw would eventually find the thing it belonged to. There were receipts for coal, 2 overdue library notices, a church bulletin, and a length of string wrapped neatly around a piece of cardboard. Mabel sorted everything into piles: keep, throw away, ask later. The third pile grew fastest. In the bottom drawer, she found a cheap composition book Henry had used for figures. Most pages held sums from the boarding house: coal deliveries, room rent, groceries, a repair to the roof. Several pages from 1932 contained names and addresses: Mrs. Ruth Gibbons, Kansas City; Clara Rowan, 14 East 23rd Street, Kansas City; Anna Rowan, typewriter ribbon. Beside Clara's address, Henry had written, "Ask M before next visit." The words were crossed out. Under them, months later, "Not yet." Then again, "After Christmas," crossed out. Then, "When work steadies," crossed out. The final entry was from 1934. "No more waiting because of money." That line was not crossed out. Mabel sat at the desk until the afternoon light thinned. She had wanted proof that Henry knew he was doing something wrong. There it was. Not proof of betrayal in the way Edith or the church women would have imagined, something more ordinary and more painful. Henry had intended to tell her. He had delayed. Each delay had acquired a reason. Each reason had expired and been replaced by another. Mabel knew that habit. A roof leak waited until spring. A difficult letter waited until after Christmas. A doctor's appointment waited until work steadied. A truth waited until everyone felt strong enough. Years could be made out of such postponements. At the back of the book, she found Ruth Gibbons's newer address. Mabel wrote the woman that evening. She did not ask whether Clara had stolen the money. The question looked ugly on paper. Instead, she wrote, "I am trying to understand what happened during the first week of April 1929. Henry believed you might know. If you remember my mother, Beatrice Rowe, I would be grateful for whatever you can tell me." She mailed it before she could revise it into something colder. The reply came 6 days later. Mrs. Gibbons remembered. She had been a junior teller then. Beatrice withdrew $210 on April 3rd. She asked for it in tens and fives. Mrs. Gibbons remembered because Beatrice joked that large bills made a person feel too rich to be careful. 2 days later, Beatrice returned to ask whether a married daughter could open an account under her own name in another city without her husband's presence. Mrs. Gibbons did not remember what she told her exactly, only that Beatrice was worried about someone finding Clara. The letter ended with one sentence Mabel read until the words blurred. "Your mother said, 'I saved that money so my girls would have choices I did not have.'" Mabel put the letter beside the folding ruler. There was no longer anything to investigate, only something to answer for. On Sunday, Cousin Edith did what Mabel had feared and, in some hidden corner of herself, expected. She learned Clara was back in St. Joseph. Mabel never discovered who told her. By then, the city had a population large enough for strangers and small enough for family news to travel without transportation. Edith approached Mabel after church while women were arranging coffee in the basement. "I heard Clara is in town." Mabel kept stacking cups. "She is." "For how long?" 3 years. Edith nearly dropped a saucer. "You knew?" "Not until Henry died." Edith's face changed in exactly the way Mabel had once imagined her own face changing if she discovered a husband had kept a mistress. "Henry knew?" "Yes." "Oh, Mabel." The pity was unbearable. "Don't. I only mean, after what Clara did, she did not steal Mama's money." Edith blinked. 2 other women at the coffee table stopped arranging spoons. Mabel could have lowered her voice. She did not. "Mama gave it to her." Edith stared. "That is not what we were told. It is what happened." "But Edwin said—" Edwin lied. The room seemed to become attentive without anyone turning fully toward them. Edith frowned. "Are you certain? After all these years, people remember things the way they need to." Mabel thought of how easily that sentence could have been spoken to dismiss Clara again. "I am certain." "How?" "My mother withdrew the money herself. There is a witness. Anna saw her give it to Clara. Mama was helping Clara leave Edwin." Edith's expression became complicated. Everyone in the family had known Edwin could be hard. No one had known how hard because no one had wanted to know the exact shape of trouble occurring behind a respectable door. "Well," Edith said, "even if that's so, running away in the night was safer." Mabel said it before Edith finished. The word hung between them. One of the women by the spoons looked down. Edith lowered her voice now. "You don't know what people will make of this." "Yes, I do. Mabel, your mother's been dead 7 years. Henry is gone. Edwin moved to Illinois. What good does it do to drag all of this out?" Mabel rested both hands on the coffee table. 8 years earlier, she would have asked the same question. Maybe that was why she knew the answer. "It gives Clara back what I helped take from her." Edith stared. "What did you take?" "Her good name in this family." No one moved. Mabel continued because stopping would have made the rest impossible. "I believed Edwin because his story was easier. I told people Clara stole from Mama. I was wrong." Edith looked genuinely distressed now. "You don't have to blame yourself in public." Apparently, I did not mind blaming Clara in public. Mrs. Bell, who had entered the basement behind them, made a small sound that might have been approval or indigestion. Edith's cheeks colored. "This is hardly the place." "No," Mabel said. "The place would have been 8 years ago." She picked up the tray of cups and carried it to the serving table. Her hands shook so badly that 2 cups rattled against each other. No one applauded. No one confessed collective guilt. The church basement did not transform into a courtroom where truth won and everybody learned a lesson. A woman asked whether the coffee was ready. A child ran between chairs. Someone changed the subject to the price of eggs. That ordinary continuation was almost a relief. By Tuesday, however, Mabel learned what public correction actually cost. 2 longtime acquaintances stopped to tell her they had always suspected there was more to the story, though neither had said so when Clara was gone. Another woman suggested that family matters should remain private. One man asked whether Edwin had been cruel in the real sense, as though there were an approved unit of measurement. Mabel answered as little as possible. She also heard through Mrs. Bell that someone had wondered whether Henry's visits to Clara were proper. That one nearly sent her out into the street looking for the speaker. Mrs. Bell stopped her. "You cannot correct every fool in Missouri. I can begin with St. Joseph. You have soup on the stove." Mabel stayed home. On Wednesday afternoon, Clara came to the boarding house. She stood on the front step wearing the same light brown coat she had worn at the bakery rooms. Mabel opened the door and neither sister spoke for several seconds. Then Clara said, "Edith came to see me." Mabel closed her eyes. What did she want? To apologize? That woman will do anything to make herself the center of a funeral. Clara's mouth twitched. It was the first expression Mabel recognized from childhood. "She said you told the church I didn't steal Mama's money." "I told Edith. The church has ears." "Why?" "Because I told them the opposite 8 years ago." Clara looked down at the step. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." "No, you had to tell me you know the truth. You didn't owe those people an explanation." Mabel leaned against the doorframe. "Maybe not, but I owed them a correction." Clara studied her face. "You look tired." "My husband died 2 weeks ago." "I know." The sentence could have been sharp. It was not. Mabel stepped back. "Come in." Clara entered the house she had not seen since 1927. Her eyes moved slowly across the hall. This was green. The wallpaper? Yes, it was terrible. You loved it. I was young. You were 37. Exactly, Clara laughed. The sound stopped both of them. Mabel had not heard her sister laugh in 8 years. She led Clara to the kitchen. Mrs. Bell was there shelling peas. She took one look at Clara and stood. "You must be the sister." Clara glanced at Mabel. "I see I have a title." "Mrs. Bell, this is Clara Rowan. Clara, Mrs. Bell occupies the back room and the moral high ground." "I pay extra for the view," Mrs. Bell said. Clara laughed again. Mabel put water on for coffee. The visit lasted 40 minutes. They did not discuss 1929. They discussed Anna's wedding, the price of coal, Mrs. Bell's theory that all modern canned peas were an insult to agriculture, and Clara's hands. A doctor at the county clinic had called it arthritis and recommended rest, warmth, and less sewing, advice that would have been more practical if rent could be paid with rest. Clara had begun taking in small mending jobs she could do slowly. Mabel looked at the frayed cuff of her own apron. "I have enough mending upstairs to employ the state legislature." Clara gave her a warning look. "I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking what you charge." "Mabel." "I pay Mrs. Bell to teach the neighbor boy arithmetic." "No, you don't," Mrs. Bell said. Mabel ignored her. "I pay the coal man for coal. I pay the grocer for beans. If you mend 6 boarders' shirts, I pay you for mending 6 boarders' shirts." Clara studied her. 15 cents a shirt if it needs more than 1 patch. Robbery. Do it yourself. Fine, 15. They shook hands. Clara's grip was light because of her swollen knuckles. Mabel felt the shape of those knuckles in her palm and had to look away. After Clara left with a basket of shirts, Mrs. Bell said, "You lied about paying me. I will give you a nickel. For 3 years of arithmetic? You can negotiate with management." Mrs. Bell threw a pea at her. It missed. That night, for the first time since Henry died, Mabel ate an entire supper. The sisters began with shirts because shirts were easier than history. Clara came every Wednesday to collect mending and returned it Friday. Sometimes she stayed for coffee. Sometimes she did not. On days her hands hurt, Anna carried the basket. Mabel paid exactly what Clara charged. Once, when she tried to add 25 cents, Clara put the coin back on the table. "Don't make generosity into another way of being in charge," Mabel bristled. Then she took the quarter back. Fine. Fine. They were learning each other again through irritation. Anna was harder. She remained polite. Politeness, Mabel discovered, could keep a person farther away than anger. Anna delivered shirts, answered questions, and declined every invitation to stay for supper. Mabel wanted to explain herself. She imagined telling Anna about January 1930, about the baby, about Henry's fear, about how grief had made the whole world sound distant for months. But each explanation threatened to become a defense, so Mabel did not offer it. One Friday, Anna came late, after the boarders had eaten. Snow had begun again, a thin March snow that melted on the steps. She set the mending basket on the kitchen table. "Mom says 2 shirts need new cuffs. She won't charge until you decide whether they're worth saving." "They belong to Mr. Talbot. He believes every shirt is worth saving until it becomes smoke." Anna smiled despite herself. Mabel took the basket. "Have you eaten?" "Yes." Mabel looked at her. Anna sighed. "No." "There's stew." "I should go." "There's still stew if you should go." Anna took off her coat. She ate at the kitchen table while Mabel dried dishes. After a few minutes she said, "Henry used to do that." "What?" "Pretend food wasn't an invitation. He'd say there happens to be a sandwich in this room. Then he'd leave it where I could take it." Mabel smiled faintly. "He knew proud women." "He married one." The smile disappeared, then returned in a different form. "Yes." Anna scraped the last carrot from her bowl. "He was afraid you would hate him." Mabel set down the plate she was holding. "For keeping you secret?" "For deciding for you in 1930. He said the longer he waited, the worse it got. Then he was ashamed of the waiting." "That sounds like him." "He loved you." "I know." Anna looked surprised by the certainty. Mabel wiped her hands on a towel. "People keep telling me that, as though love clears the account. It doesn't. I loved him too. I am furious with him." Anna's eyes softened. "I was furious with Mom for years." "For leaving?" "For not leaving sooner." Mabel sat across from her. Anna looked down at the empty bowl. "I heard them fight, Edwin and Mom. I knew what he did. I kept waiting for her to decide I mattered more than keeping the family together." Mabel felt the words settle heavily. "Then Grandma gave her the money." "Yes." "And she left." "Yes. But by then I'd learned that love could take too long." Mabel thought of Henry's crossed-out notes. "After Christmas, when work steadies, not yet." "I suppose that runs in the family," she said. Anna looked at her. Mabel did not ask forgiveness. She only said, "I'm sorry I made it harder for her to leave." Anna's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears away. "Thank you." It was not reconciliation. It was not absolution. It was a door unlatched 1 inch. For that night, it was enough. April came wet and windy. On the first warm Sunday, Mabel went to Henry's grave alone. She carried no flowers. The cemetery was full of early daffodils planted by people who had more faith in spring than she did. Henry's stone had not arrived, so a temporary marker stood in the ground with his name typed beneath a cloudy piece of glass. Mabel stood in front of it and tried to feel one thing at a time. Grief refused. She missed the scrape of Henry's chair against the kitchen floor. She missed the way he took the first biscuit from a pan and then denied doing it. She missed his cough from the upstairs hall before she remembered the cough had killed him. She was also angry, not theatrically angry. She did not imagine pounding the grave or demanding answers from the earth. She was angry in the practical way of a wife who had spent 26 years sharing bills, meals, disappointments, cold beds in winter, hot rooms in August, and every humiliating dollar of the Depression, only to discover that her husband had decided one whole branch of her family belonged outside their common life. "You were wrong," she said. The word sounded small in the open air. "You were kind, you were afraid, you meant well. And you were wrong." A crow called from a tree beyond the fence. Mabel waited. Nothing answered. That helped. For weeks she had been arguing with the version of Henry other people offered her, Good Henry, generous Henry, Henry who fixed chairs, Henry who helped Clara, Henry who loved Mabel too much to hurt her. The grave allowed a simpler truth. A good man could make a cowardly decision and then spend years being too ashamed to repair it. A loving husband could protect his wife until protection became a wall. A dead man did not need to be made innocent in order to remain loved. Mabel touched the top of the temporary marker. "I am still mad," she said. "You'll have to manage." Then she went home. 2 weeks later, Anna brought the wedding invitation. It was made from inexpensive cream stock cut carefully in half, the words typed on the same machine in the back room of the bakery. The letter E sat slightly high because that key had been repaired. "Miss Anna Rowan and Mr. Joseph Martin request the pleasure of your company." Mabel read it twice. At the bottom, beneath the formal wording, Anna had typed one extra line. "Aunt Mabel, please come." Mabel sat down. Anna pretended to inspect a crack in the kitchen window. "You don't have to cry," she said. "I am not crying." "You are making the face." "What face?" "Mom makes the same one." Mabel wiped beneath one eye. "Terrible family trait." Anna smiled. The wedding would be small, at a Lutheran church near the Martins' neighborhood, followed by supper in the church hall. Joseph's uncle could provide ham at cost. Clara was making Anna's dress from ivory rayon purchased on sale, though her hands forced her to work in short stretches. Mabel asked whether she could help. Anna hesitated. That hesitation no longer felt like a rejection, it felt honest. "Mom needs someone to do the button loops," she said, her fingers cramp. "I can do button loops." "Can you?" "I was raised by the same woman she was," Anna laughed. So on Thursday, Mabel went to Clara's rooms with a sewing basket. The wedding dress hung from a nail near the window, simple and narrow, with a softly gathered bodice and sleeves cut to the elbow. It was not the sort of dress Mabel and Clara had once imagined for their daughters when they were young enough to assume daughters would arrive in the proper order. It was better suited to 1937. Careful, pretty without pretending money did not matter. Clara sat at the table, flexing her fingers. "You don't have to finish it yourself," Mabel said. "I know. You say that the way people say they know something immediately before refusing to believe it." Clara looked up. "You've gotten bossier." "I've had boarders." "That explains nothing." Mabel sat beside her and began forming loops. They worked for nearly an hour without speaking about anything important. Then Clara said, "I was jealous of you." Mabel's needle stopped. "When?" "For years." "Of what?" "Henry." Mabel stared. Clara shook her head quickly. "Not that way. Of the marriage, of your house, of knowing what a man would do when he came through the door." Mabel looked back at the dress. "You thought I had everything." "I thought you had safety." "I did, mostly." "That was enough to envy." Mabel tied off a loop. "I envied you too." Clara gave a short laugh. "Me?" "Anna." Silence filled the room. Mabel had never said it aloud, not to Henry, not to a doctor, not even to herself in a full sentence. "When we lost the baby," she said, "I hated women pushing carriages. For a while. Then I felt wicked for hating them, so I smiled at them instead. It was exhausting." Clara's eyes shone. "Mabel. When you came back in 1930, Henry saw you with Anna. He knew what that would do to me. He was right about that part." Clara did not interrupt. "But he was wrong to think pain meant I should not know you were alive." "Yes." "And I was wrong long before that." "Yes." Mabel looked at her sister. "You could soften it. You would know I was lying." "True." Clara reached for the folding ruler, which lay on the table beside the dress. Mabel had brought it without discussing why. Clara unfolded it carefully. One hinge had loosened. The scorch mark had faded almost brown. "Mama used to wrap my knuckles with this when I cut without measuring," Clara said. "She wrapped mine harder. You cut crooked. You talked while cutting." "I still do." They both smiled. Clara laid the ruler across the hem. "You keep it," she said. Mabel shook her head. "No, Mama gave it to you." "She gave it so I could leave." "I left." "That doesn't mean its work is finished." Clara looked at her. Mabel moved the ruler back toward her sister. I spent 8 years thinking it was one more thing you took. I don't want to own it just because I finally learned I was wrong." Clara ran her thumb over the initials BR. "Then we'll share it. That is a foolish arrangement for one ruler. Wednesday through Saturday, mine. Sunday through Tuesday, yours. We live 2 miles apart. You wanted fairness." Mabel laughed. They left the ruler on the table between them. By June, the boarding house had changed in small ways. Tom's packing house hours returned for a while. Mr. Talbot's shirts acquired new cuffs. Mrs. Bell began tutoring 2 more neighborhood children at the dining room table and finally accepted 50 cents a week from their parents, which she complained about so often that Mabel knew she enjoyed it. Clara's mending grew beyond the Hartley house. A boarder sent a co-worker. The co-worker sent his wife. A widow from church brought 2 dresses to be altered. Clara could not sew for 8 hours anymore, but she could fit a sleeve, plan a repair, and teach a younger woman how to do the heavy stitching. Lillian Sykes knew a 20-year-old named Pearl Watkins, whose relief assignment had ended and who needed work. Pearl could sew quickly. Clara could sew correctly. Mabel had an unused alcove off the dining room where Henry once kept tools. The arrangement began as 1 table, then 2. Clara paid Mabel a small amount for the space over Mabel's protest. Pearl received wages by the piece. Mabel kept no percentage and was forbidden, by Clara's explicit instruction, from improving the business without being asked. A hand-painted card appeared in the front window. Rowan alterations, mending, hems, fitting. The first time Edith saw it, she stood on the sidewalk long enough to miss a streetcar. Mabel considered the sign a civic success for that reason alone. The work did not make anyone wealthy. Some weeks there were too few customers. Some women paid late. One month Pearl earned more doing laundry for a hotel than she did sewing. Clara's hands still hurt, but it was hers. That mattered. The wedding took place on June 19th. The day was hot enough that the church fans moved more warm air than cool. Anna carried 3 white roses and wore the dress Clara had made with Mabel's button loops down the back. Joseph Martin was tall, nervous, and had ears Mabel privately thought too large for his head. This pleased her for no sensible reason. He shook Mabel's hand before the service and said Henry had helped him study for the postal clerk examination the year before. Mabel closed her eyes. "Of course he did." Joseph looked alarmed. Anna laughed. "Don't worry, that means she likes you." Mabel did not sit in the front pew. She had not earned that place simply by learning the truth. She sat on Clara's other side in the second row. During the vows, Clara reached for Mabel's hand. Her grip was weak. Mabel held on anyway. At the supper afterward, there was ham, potato salad, pickles, rolls, and a white cake that leaned slightly to one side. Somebody had borrowed a radio. Children ran beneath the tables. Joseph's uncle told the same story twice about a mail sack and a runaway dog. It was not the kind of wedding people photographed for society pages. It was the kind people remembered because they had enough food and nobody had to pretend the year was prosperous. Near the end of supper, Anna stood beside Mabel. "I want to show you something." She led her to a side room where coats had been piled on chairs. From her handbag, Anna took a folded sheet of paper. Mabel recognized Henry's handwriting before she read a word. Her chest tightened. "He gave me this last summer," Anna said. "He made me promise not to show you unless he told you about us first." Mabel almost laughed. Henry and his promises. "I know. Did he write me a confession?" "No." Anna handed her the page. It was not a letter to Mabel. It was a list. Things Clara likes. Coffee strong. Hates canned peaches. Still afraid of thunderstorms, though she denies it. Things Anna likes. Detective stories. Typing fast. Hates being fussed over. Wants a blue kitchen someday. Things Mabel likes. Curtains open in the morning. Bread heal while hot. People who tell the truth even when she argues with them. At the bottom, Henry had written one line. "If I ever get these women into one room, leave them alone long enough to find each other." Mabel laughed so suddenly that she startled herself. Then she cried. Not prettily, not quietly. Anna closed the side room door and stood beside her until it passed. "He knew you," Anna said. "He knew some things." Mabel folded the paper. "He did not know everything." "No." "Neither did I," Anna nodded. Mabel held the list out. "You keep it." "Are you sure?" "Yes, I have enough of his paper. Keep the version of him that made lists about stubborn women." Anna tucked it back into her handbag. Then, after a moment, she kissed Mabel's cheek. The gesture was quick and almost shy. Mabel did not grab her. She did not say anything that would make the moment carry more weight than it could bear. She only touched Anna's shoulder once. When they returned to the hall, Clara was arguing with Mrs. Bell about whether potato salad required mustard. Mabel joined the wrong side on purpose. By autumn, work became uncertain again. Factories that had added hours cut them. Men who had begun to believe the worst had passed found themselves standing outside gates once more. The boarding house lost one tenant and gained two. A young married couple rented the third-floor front room because they could no longer afford an apartment of their own. Mabel stopped trusting good months to announce permanent recovery. No one she knew did. But the house had changed its meaning. It was no longer merely the place she and Henry had bought for children who never came. It was not merely the place they turned into income when his job disappeared. It held Mrs. Bell's arithmetic lessons, Clara's fitting table, Pearl's machine, Boarder's boots by the door, and sometimes Anna and Joseph on Sunday evenings when they could afford the streetcar fare and did not feel like walking. Clara never moved in, Mabel asked once. Clara said no. The rooms behind Novak's bakery were small, but they were hers. She had spent too many years fighting for a door she could close without permission to surrender it for comfort. Mabel understood. That understanding was worth more than agreement. On the first anniversary of Henry's death, the sisters went to the cemetery together. Clara brought no flowers either. They stood before the stone, now properly set, while winter wind moved dry grass along the path. "He should have told you," Clara said. "Yes. I should have too." "Yes. You could say I should stop repeating it. You should stop repeating it." Clara smiled. Mabel looked at Henry's name. For months, she had wondered what forgiveness was supposed to feel like. She had expected a moment when anger drained away and left only gratitude. It never happened. Instead, anger lost its job. She no longer needed it to keep the truth alive. The truth could stand by itself now. Henry had loved her. Henry had failed her. Clara had been wronged. Clara had also chosen silence later. Mabel had judged too quickly. Mabel had also changed. No single sentence canceled another. On the walk home, Clara complained that her shoes leaked. Mabel told her she had warned her about those shoes in October. Clara said being right was Mabel's least attractive quality. They argued for 3 blocks. It was the most sisterly thing they had done in years. That spring, Anna and Joseph found 2 rooms over a grocer's shop. The rent was low because the back window faced a brick wall and the sink shared a drain with the shop below. Anna invited Mabel and Clara to help with curtains. Clara brought fabric left from an alterations job. Mabel brought the folding ruler. They stood in the little kitchen while Anna described where she wanted a shelf, how Joseph insisted on buying a second-hand radio before they owned a decent table, and why the walls would look better painted pale blue someday. A blue kitchen. Mabel remembered Henry's list and said nothing. Clara unfolded the ruler. The hinge near the scorch mark stuck. "Don't force it," Mabel said. "I know how to use it. You've had stiff fingers for 2 years. And you've been interfering for 50. Anna took the ruler from both of them. "I'll measure." Mabel and Clara objected at once. Anna ignored them. She climbed onto a chair, stretched the ruler across the window, and called down the width. Mabel wrote the number on a scrap of paper. Clara checked it. "Measure again," she said. Anna rolled her eyes. "Grandma Beatrice would haunt us if we cut first," Mabel said. Anna measured again. The number matched. Clara marked the cloth. Mabel held one end while Anna held the other. For years, Mabel had thought the old ruler represented what Clara had taken from the family. Then she learned it represented what their mother had given her: money, permission, a way out. After Henry died, it became proof of a secret he had waited too long to reveal. Now, in Anna's small rented kitchen, it was simply a tool again. That felt like the kindest ending the object could have. Not evidence, not accusation, not inheritance. Something useful in the hands of 3 women measuring a window in a home that belonged to none of their old mistakes. Anna cut the first curtain panel. Clara watched the line carefully. Mabel did too. This time they had measured twice.